Hi everyone, this is Zunker Chapter 2, Theories of Career Development. I'm going to just let you know that this chapter is probably one of the more complicated chapters because what you're doing is you're covering all the theories when it comes to careers and jobs. So it might be a little bit over your head. Just take your time and listen to this chapter. And also chapter 3, the following chapter is when you actually apply those theories into reality. Okay? All right, let's start. In the 1950s, primary focus was using assessment techniques for job placement. They added broader range of factors such as self-concept, self-knowledge, and developmental issues. And when we say developmental issues here, we're talking about the lifespan of a person. As a child, you're going to have certain ideas about the world. And as you develop and grow, you become a teenager and stuff like that, you'll see that things will change. And then once you're done with college, if you decide to go to college, your perspective on life will also change again. So you're developing continuously, and that's what they're talking about. And more factors are added as time goes by. Career development theory is a set of concepts, propositions, and ideas that provide us with insights into what is believed to be true about the process of career development. So again, we had talked a little bit about the history before, and now we're actually going to go in more depth about the theories that were developed during this historical time period. So the first one we're going to talk about is called trait-oriented theory. So think about what the word trait means to you. In the early part of the 1900s, matching individual traits, which was kind of characteristics, with requirements of occupation. So it's a very straightforward approach. Start to focus on the study of work adjustment and job satisfaction variables. Individuals are attracted to an occupational environment that meets their personal needs and provides them with a satisfaction. So what they're talking about during this time period about trait-oriented theories, there are three. One is trait and factor theory, and then person environment correspondence counseling, or PEC counseling, and then also John Holland's typology, which is a leader in career counseling. It's probably the most famous. So what we're talking about is characteristics. So let's say you are really into math, right? That is one of your traits. Then you should probably do something in math. Doesn't that kind of make sense? You are your traits, your characteristic is this, then you'll do that, which is similar. Okay. Obviously, it sounds pretty typical and it makes total sense, right? But what happens is it's going to get a little bit more complicated as we start to think more about psychology of humans. All right, let's go into trait and factor theory. Parsons believes that vocational guidance is accomplished by studying the individual. So that means getting an assessment of that person. How do you do that? You interview them. Maybe you'll give them a couple of questionnaire surveys to fill out. Maybe you give them a test, like a math test or something like that. And then you also survey occupations or the assessment of that. So you're going to try to find out information about specific type of jobs. What are the requirements and stuff like that. And then you would match the individual with that occupation. Again, very to the point, very succinct, very specific, right? It's very popular with the Veterans Administration or the VA, also popular with the YMCA, Jewish Vocational Services, and colleges and universities. The most durable of all career counseling theories because it's so simple of a concept. Okay? Williamson's six sequential steps is analysis, synthesis, diagnosis, prognosis, counseling, and follow-up. So let's look a little bit about each of these different components, okay? Analysis, that's analyzing something. And then when you synthesize something, that means you're putting all of the information, the analysis part, together to try to make sense of it. And when that happens, you're going to diagnose or let people know exactly what's going on. Prognosis is the progress of this thing. Is it going to be okay or is it going to get worse? Counseling is the intervention component, right? You're going to meet someone who's going to help you achieve the goals that you have. And once that is done, you're going to follow up and see how they're doing. Okay, look at the illustration. It says, what you love, what you're good at, and what pays well. So you can become poor but happy. Maybe that idea is just a dream. Or you can be rich and make a lot of money. However, you're really bored at your job. What we're hoping is that there's a combination of all of them, and that means that you've been successful. The critics of trait and factor theory, it is a static theory, not a developmental one. Like we said before, the word developmental means lifespan. As you grow, you change, right? So people are saying that trait and theory is a static theory, which means it does not move. Focuses on identifying individual traits and factors, but does not account for how interests, values, aptitudes, achievement, and personalities grow and change. Like we said before, when you were younger, you might have thought so and so jobs were cool, but as you got older, you're like, oh, I would never want to do this. So that means that things change. So if you took an assessment with the trait and factor theory in high school, is it really going to be the same when you are, let's say, 25 years old, 35 years old, 45 years old? So what that is the critique of this specific theory. There is also Hare, Kramer, and Niles, who says that there's a single career goal for everyone. Career decisions are based primarily on measured abilities. Again, this is a critique of it. Not everyone will have only just one job or one career. People actually shift and move around. So that's another criticism of trait and factor. Trait and factor theory is too narrow in scope to be considered a major theory of career development. So what it's saying is maybe this is just too simple. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more complex, more sophisticated. Okay, so can trait and factor theory be modernized for today? I mean, today we're talking about technology and all this other stuff too. A lot more jobs are out there than it used to be as well because of technology and because of new discoveries and inventions and stuff like that. So can we modernize it? So let's find out. Let's go to the next slide. Similarity model by Prediger in 1995 says that it is influenced by trait and factor theory, the modern version, designed not to predict success or to find the ideal career, but to provide a means of evaluating occupations that are similar to you in important ways. So instead, now they're saying is, just because you are really good at math because you tested good in math, doesn't mean that you have to do a math-related job. However, let's consider these different types of jobs that are kind of math-ish to see if whether or not that would work well for you. And it goes into a little bit more further detail in the textbook, so I encourage you all to read page 23 where you talk a little bit more about the similarity model. The next one is Person-Environment Correspondence, or PEC, PEC counseling, originally known as the theory of work adjustment. So PEC theory is work is more than step-by-step task-oriented procedures. It also includes human interactions and sources of satisfaction, dissatisfaction, rewards, stress, and other psychological variables. It relies heavily on the client's assessments. So what they're saying is we really need to know what makes the individual happy, okay, or not happy. We need to understand them. So it's going to be a little bit more complicated. Assumption is that people seek to achieve and maintain a positive relationship with their work environment, whether actively or reactively. So what that is also saying is that people actually look for jobs that make them happy. So it's not just about what their skill set, like math, like the trait and factor before, but that, what also makes them emotionally satisfied. So let's talk a little bit about some of the words that we just heard. Active mode, when the worker attempts to change the work environment. So when you go into work, is your personality type the kind of person that talks and suggests that things should be changed? Are you a reactive mode? The worker attempts to correspond better with the work environment, where whatever you see the work is, you're going to adjust yourself to behave that way as well. You're not necessarily going to cause trouble, let's say, or challenge anyone. You are just going to work along with whatever the work requires you to do. This is dependent on the personality style of that person, right? Some of you guys are speakers and talkers, and some of you guys are a little bit more of a follower. Both are totally fine. Dawes and Lofquist says the person must successfully meet the job requirements, which means this person can do the job. And then the work environment must fulfill the person's requirements. So the job also has to make the person happy. That makes a relationship have correspondence or congruence, which basically means that they are balancing each other out. They're equals. They're good. They match. Okay, and that is really important. There are four keys. One is that work personality and work environment should be amenable, which basically means that they're willing to compromise or work things out if there's a disagreement or something like that. Two, individual needs are most important in determining an individual's fit into the work environment. So what does that person need? What do they want out of life, out of work? And once that job can satisfy that, then they're going to basically work there. Three, individual needs and the reinforcer system that characterizes the work setting are important aspects of stability and tenure. So what that is basically saying is that how you get paid or what you get out of your job is really important, and it will make sure that that person will stay there if they're happy or work there for a very long time. That's what tenure and stability is all about. So let's say that the job pays well. So you're going to be happy. So you're going to stay there. Or maybe people respect you at that job. So then you're going to want to stay there. Fourth is job placement is best accomplished through a match of worker traits with the job requirement of the work environment. All right, let's review a key vocabulary word that you saw on the previous slide, which is reinforcers. That means achievement, so what you have accomplished. Advancement means the potential of getting a promotion, let's say. Authority means power. Coworker means the people that you work with, right? Activities, the things that you do. Security is, will you be able to have a job for long there? Social service, basically, are you helping with society? Then social status, again, do people respect you? Do you look like a awesome, cool person that people are jealous of? And variety. Sometimes you don't want to do the same thing over and over again at the job. So maybe there's differences every day and you enjoy that. Or maybe you don't want that variety. And of course, that all may change in the future as you go along and you stay at that place. Please read Summary of Practical Applications on page 27. All right, let's talk a little bit about John Holland's typology. People are attracted to a given career because of their particular personalities and numerous variables that constitute their backgrounds. So you can see that we're starting to explore a little bit more than just what they're good at, right? We're talking about their personality, their characteristics, that what makes them happy as well. So modal personal style is the congruence of one's view of self with an occupational preference. So do you see yourself balanced out with your job? Okay, you can choose a career to satisfy your preferred modal personal orientation, so that hopefully that will then work out for you, and then you'll stay at that job. If you know what you want, you're more likely to be satisfied. If you're indecisive of what you want, you're more likely to be unsatisfied. And again, a lot of this stuff is not really brand new news to you, right? If you know what you want and you get it at your workplace, you're going to be satisfied. However, if you don't really know what you want when you're at work, it might not necessarily be the best place for you because you're like, I don't know. I don't know if this is what life is all about when it comes to work. And so that's what John Holland is talking about. And he'll create a theory that will basically be used even today, and it's very, very popular. All right, so an example is that social orientation person. So that person likes to talk, let's say, communicate and hang out with people. Work in an environment that has interactions with others. So a job like that would be like a teacher. I am working as a teacher with lots and lots of students, hundreds of students, right? So if I am social and I like to talk to students or talk to people, working with students is a wonderful career for me. Mechanically, so that means someone who might be very realistic. That's the definition when it comes to Holland, and we'll look at this in the next slide as well. It's a person who maybe likes to be in a quieter environment, not necessarily just to talk to people a lot, but to be able to concentrate on their work. So that might be another type of job. Okay, so if I'm very social, obviously I probably wouldn't want to work in a place where I couldn't talk to anyone or meet anyone. If you do not match with your career, you may end up with lots of different jobs because of dissatisfaction. Again, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you don't feel in harmony, congruent with your job, you're not necessarily going to want to stay there for very long. Then you're going to go to another job. Then you're going to go to another job. So getting to know yourself really well is a really important characteristic when it comes to going to find work, right? Obviously, we can all find work, but will it really do you want to really stay there for very long is what we're asking, okay? And this is what job specialists think about all the time. Holland stresses the importance of self-knowledge in search of vocational satisfaction and stability. So Holland's is really well known for the Rye-sect idea. Okay, Holland's 6 themes, if you look in the book, is on table 2.1 on page 28. And these are the 6 components that he has developed. The realistic, the investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. So if you look at the illustration that's along with your PowerPoint, you can see some of the characteristics, okay? So realistic is someone who's practical, scientific, likes to do things in a very specific way, methodological, okay? Then there's the people who are investigative, who like to observe, who like to analyze and evaluate things. And there are people who are artistic, so they want to be innovative. They're intuitive, basically means they kind of follow their gut instinct. And they're creative. And there's the social, which are people who would like to enlighten other people through communication and stuff, inform, and then they also like to train. Enterprising is someone who likes to influence someone, to persuade someone, or to perform, okay? So influential, enterprising, you can kind of think about like businesses, like CEOs of companies. Those are people who are very enterprising. And then there's conventional. So conventional are people who like to work on facts, right? So they're data-driven, they're analytical, and they're detail-oriented. Okay? In the hexagon, letters that are next to each other are similar. So realistic is very similar to conventional, and it's also really similar to investigative. Do you see that? Let's look at social, which is at the bottom. It is close to artistic and enterprising. And if you look at the definitions of each of the words that we just reviewed, you can see how they're kind of related. Okay? And then those who are opposites of each other basically means that they're not similar at all. So artistic and conventional. So someone who's creative and wants to, make things up, it's not necessarily going to be the same person who likes facts, likes data. Does that make sense? So take a second to just look through and see how that makes sense to you. All right, 5 key concepts. 1, consistency, relations to personality as well as to environment. So if you look at this, you're going to see the most consistent would be the ESA or the RIC, and then least consistent would be RAE or CAS. Take a moment to look at the previous slide again to see what that means. So just match up those letters with the definition. Okay. Number 2, differentiation. People who fit a pure personality type will express little resemblance to other types. So those who fit several personality types have poorly defined personality styles. So what that is saying is, if you really, really just fit in one of those letters, then obviously you're not going to be similar to the other ones. However, people who kind of fit in a bunch of them, that means that who is this person then? Do they really know what they really love, what their passions are? Okay, so that's an argument that can be given by people who are going through tests. However, maybe that really means that you're just a curious person and you kind of enjoy a little bit of everything. You don't want to lock yourself in, okay? And that might be a good thing, that might be a bad thing. It really does depend on the interpreter and then also the individual and how they work together and talk those things out. Identity is number 3. Those who have a clear and stable picture of their goals, interests, and talents are staying with the environment. So if you know exactly what you want out of life, you know what your identity is then. But if you don't know what you want, then of course you don't have that identity, which we're hoping people will help find. Okay, people who are counselors or probation officers, whoever you are going to become, that you will be able to help other people find themselves if that's their need. Okay. 4 is congruence, when a person's personality type matches the environment. So remember that harmony that I was talking about before. That's what congruence is. 5 is calculus. The theoretical relationship between types of occupational environments lend themselves to empirical research techniques. More research will strengthen Holland's theory. So that's not necessarily about math. What it's saying is that the more people test, the more likely that this is actually going to be true, and that's wonderful. And that's what they're talking about, that this actually does work. All right, believe that personality and interests are more important than intelligence because intelligence itself can be debated. Sometimes you meet people who are really intelligent, but they're not intelligent at the same time. Do you know what I mean? And so that's what it's talking about. So it gets a little bit iffy, and you can argue really about that. When tested with ethnically diverse people and different socioeconomic backgrounds, international groups of people, the results were kind of mixed on this. And you can think about this in a very specific way. If you are, let's say, from a lower socioeconomic status, you might not necessarily care about your job. You just want a job. So you'll take whatever job, even if it doesn't make you happy, because you need to make money to provide for, let's say, for your family. Does that make sense? Or value systems from different countries are very different as well, right? There are some jobs that are seen as really important in one culture that is looked down upon in another culture. So then Holland's Ryasek would not necessarily be accurate for those people. Does that make sense? And then empirically, Holland has one of the strongest theories in the book. So the validity. So what that means is empirically, what that means is that there's been research done, and it seems to be the most accurate of all of the different types of theories that there are. Okay, remember that. All right, social learning and cognitive theories is the next area. So significant influences on social conditioning, social position, and life events. And we're going to actually define these words as we go along in the next couple of slides. There's also problem solving, decision making skills, and must be able to process information effectively and to think rationally. All right, Crumbolt's learning theory of career counseling is LTCC. The origins of career choice, that's what they're talking about. Important questions of what career counselors can do to help solve career-related problems. So what can they do? So career development involves 4 factors in this section. Number 1 is genetic endowments and special abilities. So what that is talking about are your abilities and disabilities. So what are you able to do and what you are not able to do. Those things, number 1, will help a person understand who your client is. Okay. Number 2 is environmental conditions and events. So an example is government limiting a certain type of job. So let's say, for example, coal is being stopped, right? We're not going to mine for coal anymore because renewable energies is a lot better for the environment, whatever, they're saying. So because of that, that means that a person who's a coal miner is going to lose their job, or fewer and fewer people are going to be coal miners. So that's one way that it can affect a person. And then there's also natural disaster affecting economic conditions. So let's say that there's a drought. So if there's a drought, you're most likely not going to become a farmer. Okay? If the weather changes and limits the ability to grow food, then you're no longer going to do that thing. You're going to do something else. So that would be an event, right? A natural disaster and stuff like that. 3, learning experiences, knowing the consequences of an action, such as if you understand that you fix something for someone, they're going to pay you. So you're learning that idea, that concept. So that might also affect what you're going to do. Or through society's reaction, such as all politicians are dishonest, can affect a political future, or all doctors are rich. So that is considered a reaction in society. If people say, oh, politicians are bad, most likely you will not want to become a politician. However, if you hear all doctors are rich, you might want to actually become a doctor, because society is actually letting you know that this is actually a looked up upon, a respected job, and so you might want to do it. And then you suddenly go, oh, maybe I should become a doctor, because you think of it to be associated with richness and, wealthiness. Okay? 4 is task approach skills. Already developed skills, problem solving skills, work habits, mental sets, emotional responses, and cognitive responses. can this person modify or adjust to succeed when they fail the first time? So task approach skills means when you have a problem in front of you, how do you resolve it? And if you fail, do you think about it in a different way? Do you approach it in a different way? And if so, people want to see that. They want to see whether or not you're able to, try it out again 4 or 5 times, 6, 7 times, 8, 9, 10 times to see if you can solve this, or do you just give up and say, I'm not interested, and that's it? Okay, so you can see that these are some factors when it comes to career development that career counselors and people who are helping other people think about jobs will consider. Career counselors need to point out these things if the client does not recognize them. So these are some of the things that your client might exhibit or tell you, and then you will probably want to point it out so that they can improve upon themselves. They can become more self-aware. They can understand themselves a little bit better. The first one is person may fail to recognize that a remediable problem exists, which basically means that things can be fixed, okay? They don't realize that the problem can be fixed. So if they don't, then they're not gonna probably just give up, right? So you want to point out, hey, have you ever thought about approaching this problem this way? Or do you think maybe if you try it this way, the results might actually be different? Person may fail to exert the effort needed to make a decision or solve a problem. So they might take the easy way out of a problem, just like quitting, because they really are not really motivated. So how do you figure out a way to motivate someone, encourage someone to do something so they don't just like go, whatever, and then just quit? Person may eliminate a potentially satisfying alternative for inappropriate reasons. If you don't know all the possibilities, you're going to go, well, whatever. And then you're like, I don't think this field is going to be very interesting. However, once you see the different potential possibilities, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Let me think about working in this specific field. Okay. And so that means that they just have no real solid reasons why they're going to not choose this thing. Person may choose poor alternatives for inappropriate reasons. False beliefs and unrealistic expectations stand in their way, like I am dumb or I must be the best. So, maybe you can become a math teacher. And you're like, no, I'm just not very good. I'm not very smart, so I'm not going to do anything in education. However, maybe if you just put some proper time into it, you actually could be. Okay, so silly reasons like I'm dumb, which most likely is not true, can make people not choose a job that they might actually find a lot of rewarding benefits from. And then person may suffer anguish and anxiety over a perceived inability to achieve goals. So if they also think that they're not going to be able to do anything, right? They're nervous about ever getting anything right, then they also might not necessarily get the stuff that they want because they're so scared of the process that they're not willing to see what the end game is all about. Happenstance approach theory. This is kind of fun, okay? So chance events over one's lifespan can have both positive and negative, okay? So weird things that might happen to you might actually benefit you. It might not necessarily either. So let's talk about that, okay? Learn about an interesting job from a friend. So you just happen to be talking to a friend and your friend goes, hey, there's this job that we're looking to fill, this position that we're looking to fill. Are you interested in doing this? You're like, oh, I never thought about that, but maybe I can do it. Or you might lose a job due to outsourcing, which again means a job goes from this country to another country because they are paying lower wages, only to find a better one. So just because you got fired from a job or laid off from a job, you actually end up finding another job, and that job is much more amazing than the previous job. Isn't that kind of funny? So that's what happenstance basically means. It's unpredictable social factors, environmental conditions, and chance events over the lifespan that are to be recognized as important influences in a client's lives. Clients can learn to deal positively with unplanned events. Sometimes let's say an example would be like you have a significant other, right? and you think that this is the final person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. But then one day you get dumped. And you're like, what is going on? I thought he or she, or they were going to be the person for me. But then once you break up with that person because they dumped you, you go out and you hang out with your friends and you actually meet that wonderful person that you really know is who you're really uh, destined to be with for the rest of your life. So that's kind of like a thank goodness that person dumped me, because then now I've actually met the person that I really truly love. Let's say. Okay. 5 critical client skills is again curiosity, explore opportunities given due to happenstance. Persistence is a way to deal with obstacles due to happenstance. So, being determined to continue on even when people say no or a bad thing happens. Flexibility is adapting and adjusting to events unfolding. It's like, if this happens, what are you going to do? You're going to try to, find a way to improve life, right? Optimism, again, to be optimistic means to be positive, have a positive attitude when pursuing new opportunities. And then risk taking can yield positive outcomes and a more secure job. So maybe your friend told you about this job and you're like, oh, I never thought about that as a potential job. Let me try it out and see what happens. So you're taking that risk. You're going to go to the job interview and then actually might end up getting a job that you really, really love. Career development from a cognitive information processing CIP perspective. How people make a career decision and use information in career problem solving and decision making is the area that we're talking about now. So there are 10 assumptions underlying CIP, which I'm not going to read all through. You're going to need to look at the book. It's table 2.2 on page 40. We use the 10 assumptions to provide learning events that will develop the person's processing abilities. So the stage of processing is screening. So you're going to see what's going on, and then you're going to translate. You're going to try to understand what's going on. You're going to encode it and put it into short-term memory, and then you're going to store it into long-term memory. And then when you need it again, you're going to activate it. You're going to bring it back. You're going to recall it later on. You're going to bring it into your current state of memory, and then transform the info into working memory to arrive at a solution. Then you're going to use it to resolve something. That's what they're talking about when it comes to thinking, processing in your mind. CASVE is communication, which basically means receiving, encoding, and sending out questions or queries. Analysis is identifying and placing problems in a conceptual framework. So you're going to take everything that you have and you're going to try to think about what this all is about. Synthesis is then actually mixing everything together and going, oh, okay, all of these things have something in common. They're things that make sense together. It all kind of is bringing you to a realization. Valuing is judging each other's actions as to its likelihood of success and failures and its impact on others. So what's going to happen? And then execution is implementing strategies to carry out the plan. Execution is actually the action part. What are you going to do to actually achieve this? Career development from a social cognitive perspective. Social cognitive theory, career theory is SCCT. Self-knowledge as the foundation for making a career decision. So really to understand yourself before you can actually make a decision about work. So there are 3 ways to translate and share knowledge between existing theories and emerging ones. Number 1 is agree on a common meaning for conceptually related concepts, self-concept and self-efficacy. So who are you? How do you see yourself? And also self-efficacy is, can you do something? Are you able to do something? You need to see those things and how they relate. Like if I failed math at school, I probably won't be good with a job. Okay, so 1 affects the other. 2, fully describe and define common outcomes such as satisfaction and stability. And then 3 is fully explain the relationship among such diverse constructs as interests, self-efficacy, abilities, and needs. Okay, so to be able to understand the relationship between these ideas that we were raised to expect, such as knowing what we like, right? Knowing what we can do, what we know we are able to do, and also what do we need out of life, okay? There are three determinants of career development here. Number one is self-efficacy. Again, set of beliefs about a specific performance domain. Can you do this? Two is outcome expectations. What are your reinforcers, like we saw in a different theory, which are how much are you getting paid? Do you feel powerful? Do you feel successful? Do you feel like you are cool and awesome? So that's another thing. And three is personal goals, personal agency, guides that sustain behavior. So, what is it that you want out of life? Maybe it's to buy a house or to travel, and this job pays really well for you to be able to get those things. Those are your personal goals. Developmental theories, like we talked about before, is about aging through the lifespan, right? Individuals make changes during developmental stages and adapt to changing life roles. So the self-concept plays a very important critical role in this theory. People should project themselves into their work environment. So what they're saying is you should see yourself in the work environment in a very specific way. Some people's jobs have been outsourced, experienced job loss, opting to change careers, deciding to do part-time work instead. So these are some of the things that happen because of life. Okay, because of a job being outsourced, you might lose a job or you might change your job. Experienced job loss means, maybe you just get laid off because the company's not doing very well. Opting to change careers, again, you decide, hey, you're reflecting on life and you're like, you know what? This isn't making me happy anymore. I think I'm going to change my job to something else. Or you go, hey, uh, I think that my values about raising children are really more important than work and buying material stuff. So then if you are maybe, let's say, with a partner or something like that, you might end up doing part-time work to spend more time with your children. So then your value system right there has changed a little bit, right? Donald Super criticizes other career developmental theories. So what that is basically saying is that this specific person likes his idea of what growing and developing is. It does not address adult concerns. So what happens is that a lot of times people get tested, uh, think about all this stuff when they're really young, but not later on when they're adults. Okay, we tend to focus a lot on what do you want to be when you grow up, not what do you want to do as an adult in 5 years. Okay, so it does not address adult concerns. And again, people change and they become, let's say, more mature. They'll change, they'll get married, maybe they acquire a disability. All those things later on as an adult should affect the person's view on jobs as well. Focus primarily on initial career choice. Remember, as a young kid or as a high school student or as a freshman in college, you're pretty young usually when that happens. And what he is saying is, even as an adult, 35 years old, 45 years old, 55 years old, you actually do change and your taste change as well. So maybe you don't like the things that you did when you were 18 or 19 years old. People narrow down their career choices due to social class. So sometimes if you come from, let's say, a lower socioeconomic status, you might go, you know what, I don't belong in this area, so I'm not going to do a job in this area. Okay, levels of interest is, maybe you're not aware of what you're really truly interested in, so then you limit yourself to exactly what you can do. And also, experiences with sex typing. What sex typing means is what we have learned by observing other people when it comes to jobs. So sex typing means certain jobs we see as women-oriented jobs, and some jobs we see as men-oriented jobs. So I'll give you an example. A nurse. When you envision a nurse, do you envision a female nurse or a male nurse? Typically, we envision a female nurse. And when we hear about doctors, we tend to physically think of a male doctor instead of a female doctor. And that's what sex typing is. It's something that's a social construct, which means that society somehow decided that this is how it's appropriate, and then we all accept it for just because we were told that, and we don't challenge it. However, you millennials and you Gen Zs actually are changing a lot of this stuff, okay? And so you might say, oh, well, in today's world, there's a lot of female doctors and there's a lot of male nurses and stuff like that. But remember, before you were born, usually those things had very specific types of genders to them, okay? Think about a kindergarten teacher. Is that a female or a male-oriented job, you think? it's most likely female, right? How many kindergarten teachers do you know that are male? For some reason, society doesn't allow or approve of many men being kindergarten teachers. So that's kind of interesting. We want to talk about that and think about why that is. And of course, is there a reason why? You know? And back in the olden days, they might say, well, women are much more maternal, they know how to take care of children and all that other stuff. And so that's why they only allow females to and not men. Okay? Lifespan, life space approach to careers. Career development is a process that unfolds gradually over the lifespan. So as you can see in this image of this woman who's pregnant, she might have been doing one job before she was pregnant, but maybe after she had a baby, she's, you know what? I don't want to do this job anymore. I want to do something different. So that can be affected because of the development of her. Continuous process that involves multiple life roles, such as parenthood, is a major thing, or marriage is also another thing as well. Developmental stages. So let's talk really about lifespan. I'm sure you've had a lot of fun with your previous classes on lifespan, but let's do a quick refresher. Growth, birth to 15. That's 0 to 15. During this time period is when you develop the development of capacity, which basically means learning how to do the things that you can do. Your attitudes, that's when you develop that. Your interests and your needs associated with self-concepts. What do you need to do to become the person that you want to be? Exploratory is about age 16 to 24. Choices are narrowed but not finalized. So think about it. You're 16 years old. That's probably about 10th, 11th grade-ish, right? And so during this time period, you're like, well, I know I don't want to do this, and I don't know that I don't want to do that, but I kind of maybe want to do this, but I'm not sure. So that's the time when you're narrowing things down. When you're in college, you're like, should I major in this or should I major in that? I don't know. Let me try it out. So they're narrowed down to much more specific things, but not necessarily very official just yet because you're still learning. And so you might change your major. Establishment is when you're about 25 to 44 is when you're like, okay, I think I know who I am now and I know what kind of work I want to do and stuff like that. So trial and stabilization through work experiences. You're going to probably do internships. You're probably going to get jobs. And you're like, oh, I really enjoyed doing this and I really hated doing that. So once you start to actually work, you're going to make better choices that way because they're knowledgeable about what's going on. Maintenance basically means to keep it going, right? To maintain something is around 44 to 64. So once you find the jobs that you want, you're going to try to keep it until you retire, right? So that's continual adjustment process to improve working position and situation. So maybe you are working at the Department of Rehab as a counselor, and now you want to become a manager there. So you're going to work, but you're going to also try to improve your working abilities and also your position while you're there. Decline is about 65 and beyond. Pre-retirement considerations. So you're going to start thinking, oh, you know what? I'm getting around that time where I'm a little bit older now, and I don't know if I just want to work all the time. So you might start to reduce the amount of hours that you work, and then you eventually will retire. However, I will say this, which is that more and more people are actually working into their retirement because they need to pay for things. Unfortunately, living is very expensive. The cost of living is very expensive, especially in LA, in all the metropolitan cities. So people are actually having to work longer, although there are also rural areas where they need to work longer as well, just because of the benefits and stuff are a lot less than it used to be. And also the cost of living is a lot more expensive than it used to be. Developmental tasks, so there's also these things that you need to do during all these different periods. The first one is called crystallization. That's between 14 and 18. That's formulating a general vocational goal through awareness of resources, contingencies, interests, values, and planning for the preferred occupation. So during this time period, you're thinking about, which is what formulating is, considering what your area you're going to focus on because you're going to be aware of the things that you can get to learn more about them. So those are resources or contingencies, what ifs that are happening in that specific area. So if I do this, will I get that? Okay. And then there's interests, values, and then of course planning for it. Specification is between 18 and 21. You're moving from a tentative vocational preference to a specific one. Tentative means I'm not just sure just yet, but during this 18 to 21, typically, if you, let's say, go to college, then you're going to start to really choose a specific major, right, during that time period. Of course, some of us choose it a little bit later than others due to financial reasons and stuff like that, which is totally fine as well. So just move them around that way. Adjust it to every person, to each unique individual. There is also implementation, which basically means putting it actually into action. So that's 21 to 24. Completing for vocational preference and entering into employment. So you're going to get your degree and then you're going to apply for jobs and start working. That's what it is, the action part that you always hear. Let's implement this idea. Let's implement these concepts into reality. Stabilization. 24 to 35, confirming a preferred career by actual work. So remember we talked a little bit about that. Now that you've had some time to explore different internships and different types of jobs, you're really going to be able to find out what you like, and then you're going to start working in that actual work. Okay, and then also, let's see, you're going to also experience and use of talents to demonstrate career choice as an appropriate one. And of course, your abilities that we were talking about before, you're actually going to be able to use your abilities, show off your abilities at these job places. And then you're going to say, here, this is why I deserve to be here long term. Consolidation is 35 and beyond. Consolidate means to put everything together. Establishment in a career by advancement, status, and seniority. So you're going to end up getting married potentially, have children potentially, all these things that make you who you are as a person. So this is that time period. And then also, becoming that typical success story that you think of yourself when you were growing up. Okay, so you're gonna do all of that during the 35 and beyond age. Age and transitions again are very flexible and not occurring in a well-ordered sequence. What that means is sometimes we go back and forth through all these developmental tasks. Maybe we were working in one career. Let's say you were a postal worker. And there's just not a lot of mail anymore, right? So then you're like, you know what? I think I'm going to do something else. And then it becomes a totally different thing. So that means that you need to start to formulate general goals, vocational goals. So that's crystallization, and then go through all that cycle again. Okay, so it goes all over the place. It's not linear. It goes back and forth and stuff like that because life is a little bit crazy like that, right? Recycle through one or more stages are also known as mini cycles. Career maturity. So Donald Super in 1951, so that has been about 70 years ago, study of ninth grade boys, all Caucasian male, because again, a lot of studies were done on just Caucasian men, right? Boys who were seen as vocationally mature in the ninth grade were significantly more successful as young adults. So what that is saying is, back in the 1950s, around ninth grade, if that person knew what they wanted to do, they're more likely to be successful. And think about that. Remember, we talked a little bit about if you know yourself pretty well, then you're probably going to know how to become successful in the areas that you're interested in, right? Although ninth grade is not old enough to make adequate career decisions. So it hasn't been crystallized yet, but these people do know themselves. And this is probably the reason why they become successful later. Because if you still don't know who you are, by, let's say, 16 years old or so, or 15 years old, and you need to explore a little bit more, hopefully that person does get to explore themselves and get to really know themselves so that once they go into, let's say, college, they can actually start focusing immediately. Some of us are delayed, so we might not get to know ourselves or really understand ourselves until our 20s and 30s, right? So you can see how that might delay or stunt your success rate. So, and that's again more related to intelligence than age, because if you understand yourself, you're more likely to be intelligent. If you are not, I'm not saying that you're dumb or anything like that, obviously, but if you're having that sense of awareness and what you're able to do, self-efficacy, it tends to be better for you in the long run. Circumscription, compromise, and self-creation. A developmental theory of occupational aspirations. So let's define some words here just in case you don't know. Circumscription is basically putting some restraints, some limits on things. Okay, so what that basically means is you're narrowing things down. Compromise is meaning let's work together and decide how this is going to go because we all can't have it our own ways all the time. And then self-creation is basically, again, you developing and turning into a person that you want. Okay, so this is again a developmental theory of occupational aspirations. Aspiration is that perfect thing at the end that you have. Okay, um, will you always achieve it? Not necessarily, right? But you will head in that direction because you aspire, you hope to be this thing that you have in your head. This is incorporating biosocial developmental approach, describes how people become attracted to certain occupations. Why are some jobs you're attracted to more than others? So we'll think about that and understand that through this theory. Self-concept in vocational development is a key factor to career selection. Again, self-concept, knowing who you are. People want jobs that are compatible with their self-images. You want to work in an area where you think you belong. Occupational preferences emerge within the complexities that accompany physical and mental growth. So as you grow physically as well as mentally, you're learning more, acquiring more, but also physically doing things, you're going to become a much more complex person, okay? More sophisticated person because you have experience. We hear about people who are older being wiser, right? That is what we're talking about here. There is a compromise in decision making, generalizations formed about occupations through sex typing, level of work, and fields of work, cognitive maps of occupation. So what that is saying is that we learn how to narrow ourselves into specific things because of what we acquire, what we realize, what we see, what is influencing us. So again, sex typing is basically we seeing that specific jobs are for specific genders. And if you are, let's say, female, you're going to look at female jobs. And if you're a male, you might see male jobs, if that makes sense to you. But then also understanding how much work is involved, which is the level of work, and the field of work. What area are you going to be in? Okay, you understand all those things, then you're more likely to narrow things down to an area that is appropriate for you. Determinants is again social class, level of intelligence, and experiences with sex typing. So that means, let's say that if you grew up, seeing female doctors all the time, you're going to assume that doctors can be females as well. But if you grew up back in the olden days where I grew up, it was a lot more male doctors. So you would only think that doctors are men. Okay? All right, 4 stages. Number 1, orientation to size and power. So this is ages 3 to 5. Again, we're talking about developmental theories, right? Thought process is concrete. You start to understand things in a realistic way. Children develop some sense through sex roles of what it means to be an adult. So girls will look at women, maybe their mothers, and play their mothers, pretend to play, let's say, a homemaker, if that's a stay-at-home mom, right? So that's what it's talking about right there during time. You see what's real, what's concrete, what is there that's happening, and then you imitate that. 2, orientation to sex roles is between 6 and 8. So your self-concept is influenced by gender development. So during this time period, you're going to say, girls can only do this, and boys can only do this because that's what you physically see or you see with your own eyes. 3, orientation to social valuation, which is from 9 to 13. Development of concepts of social class contributes to the awareness of self in situation. Preferences for level of work develop. So during 9 to 13, you're talking about development of concepts of social class. So if I become a doctor, I might actually have a really nice life, right? However, if I am, let's say, a person who picks trash is not going to be so glamorous or whatever. You're like, yeah, people might look down upon that. So now you're talking about how people value you if you end up doing this specific type of job. 4, orientation to the internal unique self starts at 14. 14, do you remember yourself? Were you emo? Were you talking about life and what's the whole point of it and all that other, stuff? It's because you're starting to think about yourself in a more meaningful level. That's introspective thinking about yourself. What is the meaning of life? And that promotes greater self-awareness and perceptions of others. So you start to understand yourself a little bit more. When you meet other people, you're going to start to understand them as well. Individuals achieve greater perception of vocational aspirations in the context of self, sex roles, and social class again. How Gottfriedson differs from other theories. In career development, there is an attempt to implement the social self and then the psychological self. So you develop your social identity through your work. So imagine if you were going to a party, right? And usually people you meet, strangers, are going to want to know your name, maybe if you're married or single, and then also, what do you do for work? If you are very proud of your work, you're going to see that in your identity. However, if you're kind of like whatever about your job or you are embarrassed about your job, people can see that in your identity as well. So again, all of that is affected and connected. How cognitions of self and occupations develop from early childhood. Again, a lot of times we see things just through childhood, and that's only one smart part of the lifespan, right? And so again, he believes that you can see into older age and how that also changes during that time period as well. Career choice is a process of eliminating options to narrow one's choices. So as you go along, you're going to start to go, oh, well, you know what, I don't really like this job. Or, you know what, I don't like this job. But I do like this job and I do like this job, so I'm going to probably stay in this area. So again, we start to develop a more specific thing as we get older and we develop. People compromise their goals as they try to implement their aspirations. So they eliminate the negatives instead of choosing the most positive. So instead of saying, I really like this, I'm going to do this. Instead, people can go, I don't want to do that, so I definitely won't do that. I'm going to do this because I don't want to do this. So do you see there's a different way of choosing what you want to do? So if you eliminate from all the negatives, you really don't necessarily know who you are just yet. You just know, I don't want to do those things, right? But if you actually have a high self-concept, you understand yourself, you're going to go, I want to do this field. And it's going to be more likely that you're going to be happier and long-lasting in those fields. All right, also read Major Concept of Gottfriedson Theory on page 57 to 59 that talks about self-concept, images of occupation, cognitive maps of occupations, social space, circumscription, and then again, compromise. Again, we reviewed a little bit of that earlier in the previous slides, but please read into it so you really understand Gottfriedson's theory. In-person environment perspective focuses attention on contextual interaction over the lifespan. So what does contextual interaction mean? That means things in a very specific situation. Okay? Clients are products of an environment that is very inclusive but also unique. So what that is saying is where you are in the world, where you are in the city, where you are in a specific neighborhood is going to affect who you are and how you see the world. Okay, so it's very unique. Career development is influenced and constructed within several environmental systems. Your family, maybe your place of worship, such as a church or a synagogue, your neighborhood, your school, your neighbors, your friends, your workplace, community agencies, culture, and customs of the larger environment. So these are the areas, the surrounding, the environment that potentially can influence you as well. If you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of resources, you might see certain jobs as ones to do because you're kind of like, this is all I can do because that's all you're aware of. However, if you have a lot of resources in the community, you can start to explore different jobs that you didn't know existed. Right? So maybe if you went to a school that really promotes all these STEM jobs or STEAM jobs, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math, then you might actually end up going into those areas. But if you have a school that doesn't really have a lot of resources, you might not realize the opportunities that are in front of you. The client does not exist totally within a person. So again, the environment does affect that person. Your parents, their level of education also affects it. This is why we look at people who are first generation students and applaud them and encourage them because we know that education will bring people potentially out of the positions where they are now. Right? And we're not saying that it's a bad thing that your parents, if you are first generation, they're hard workers. They put, themselves on the line. They work 2, 3, 4 jobs to provide for their families. So again, that value system right there is also important as well. I'm not trying to degrade anyone at all. Okay, this means that people influence and are influenced as they interact within their environment. So it's an ecological system theory. So that means again how your environment is built has the resources will affect you in your decision making. Counselors need to unearth both internal and external variables that contribute to career development. So that means being able to understand the environment and how that has affected the person, but also how the thinking process was affected because of that, but also just because of the person who they are. Those things will need to now be connected somehow. Bronfenbrenner is probably the most well known when it comes to this type of environment. So imagine a circle with uh, four circles outside of it. Okay, so the inner circle, the center, is the microsystem, who is the person. So it could be you, or it could be your client, your consumer. The next circle is, who else is really close to that specific person. It would be family, your peer groups, and then your schoolmates, right? And then the next circle will be called the exosystem, and that comprises of friends and family, like maybe extended family, your neighbors, the workplace, television, and stuff like that. So that's the next area, the next circle that affects people. And then the macro system of broad ideologies expressed by modeled and modeled by the sociocultural group. So that could be the government and stuff like that, right? So it's a bigger circle, not necessarily close to you, but this still has an effect on you because of the way legislation is decided. That could affect how, let's say, you react to it. So let's talk about some examples. Is Jim's problem in school a learning disability or the result of current marital conflict between his parents? So if a child is at school and they're not doing very well, is it because of a learning disability, or is it really because the parents were having a fight and that's the reason why they cannot do well? We don't know. So we need to explore those things and find out. Dan thinks he is too stupid to get accepted to college. Is this a self-concept problem or the result of underfunded and inadequate schools, or both? So let's say that he is not going to get into college, or he thinks he's not going to get into college. Is it because the school didn't have the resources to really teach him? Or is it really because he just thinks he's not very good or very smart? Or maybe it's a little bit of both, right? We don't know. We need to explore those things by talking to our clients to really find out. Constructivism is the next section. There is no fixed truth. What does that mean? What does it mean to have no fixed truth? Individuals define themselves as they participate in events and relationships in the environment. In order to make sense of the world, each person develops personal constructs in which his or her views of the world differ from others. So what does that mean? That means that, let's say that I see life in a very specific way, right? Because I live my life in a very specific way. I was raised by parents in a very specific way. And if I ask you, what is life all about? Your definition of that might be very different because of the way that you were raised by your parents, or maybe lack of parents, right? How do you see the world? Is your world and your definition more correct than mine? Or are we both correct? Because we live very different lives. And that's it. So that's what we're talking about in the sense of there's no fixed truth, meaning there's no one way that anything is accurate. How we perceive it individually is honest and truthful and is still right because we come from very different histories or different paths. Personal constructs are developed by people through the way they interpret and view their lives. Life role clarity and meaning of life are expressed in one's career. So how we see the world means that we place a lot of value in work, or we maybe not place a lot of value in work. We don't know. Each person is going to be unique in that way. Person work environment, how the person fits into the work role and how the work role fits into the person's lifestyle. Again, sometimes we work to make a lot of money to get the things that we want, like buy a house or to travel or, whatever. While other people are going to work just to pay rent and get food, and that's it. Okay? So again, very different. How do we create our realities that way? Career construction, a developmental theory on vocational behavior. So in this one, it's talking about expanding Super's theory of vocational development. So remember Super's theory about, lifespan, right? People construct their own reality or truth as they go along. Careers are to be viewed from a developmental contextual viewpoint that focus on one's adaptation to environment through the development of inner structures. So it kind of mixes in the Bronfenbrenner that we talked about those different systems in that circle, right? But then also about life as well. As it goes on, right? things will change as well. The people that come into our lives will also change as well, right? So again, these are things that are all interconnected and influence how we see the world. 3 of the 16 propositions for career development are mentioned in the textbook. So let's look at those right now. Developmental contextualism. Again, just break that down. Development, again, is lifespan, and contextualism is within a specific context or environment or situation, right? The core roles developed through an individual's life structure, preferences of life roles, and an individual's career patterns are very specific about how you are growing up and also where you are growing up, as we talked about before. Development of vocational self-concept that includes differences, vocational characteristics, occupational requirements, work satisfaction, how self-concepts develop and are implemented in work roles, and continuity of self-concepts. Again, how you see all these different things that are mentioned here is as you are growing, you're going to experience certain things. First, you're going to think about it. Remember the crystallization period, formulating ideas and understanding, but then you're going to narrow it down, and then you can actually go and study it, and then you can actually do work or internship. So that's what it's talking about, is how you grow, and in your environment is how you're going to see all these different things, okay? If you had a really bad experience in, let's say, with a nurse, right? You're going to not look at the medical profession in a very positive way. But there are other people who might have had disabilities and had a really great working relationships with their doctors, right? So that means like they look at doctors in a positive way. So it really is unique to every person. Vocational developmental tasks experience as social expectations, the growth experience during career transition, construct, and how career construction is fostered. So what that is basically saying is that as you grow in your society, how they are told to you will also affect how you see these things as well. Okay, and then also how you see yourself when you are experiencing a career change and stuff like that will also affect how you see the world and the work life as well. Growth. 4 major tasks that society has imposed upon children is number 1, become concerned about one's future as a worker. So again, we're talking about developmental, they're growing up, so you're going to need to think about what you're going to do. Most kids are probably expecting that they're going to have to work when they grow up, right? So they become much more concerned about it because they're aware of that. 2, increase personal control over one's vocational activities, being allowed to decide what you want to do. It's a very westernized idea where you can kind of choose what you want to do. There are other people who believe growth is about being told what to do, right? Might be more of a collectivist society or family structure. And again, that will be different depending on exactly who you are. 3, form conceptions about how to make educational and vocational choices. Again, you're going to learn how to decide how you're going to decide what you want to do or what you want to major in. 4, acquire the confidence to make and implement these career choices. Again, we're talking about making those decisions after you have thought about it. Exploration is crystallization process. Choice is narrow but not finalized. Specification is in-depth reality testing, how one feels in relation to the world. Again, you're going to start to think about it as you grow older. Actualization is focusing on career identification through various jobs in a chosen group until congruence is found. So you're going to work at different jobs until you find that job that fits you perfectly. Congruence, harmoniously, and so that's what the final step would be. Establishment is settling down process in a permanent job. So now that you have found your job, let's make yourself the best that you can be in that field so that maybe you can get a promotion soon. Refine their occupational role and consolidate their position. So now that you know what you want to do, you might stop doing other things because now you have found what you wanted to do. So is there growth? Is there slow growth? And is there no growth? And that's something you're going to have to analyze. How much do you want? That's why sometimes we want to do this job, but then at the end, we want to own our own businesses, let's say. So that means there's a lot of growth. So how do you reach that career that you want, that job that you want, that allows you to be who you are at the same time? Maintenance, again, we talked about that as, try to keep it there and maintain it. View careers in terms of implementing future opportunities. So you're going to see the future. You're going to consider the future and how are you going to stay and reach that future that you have in your mind. Updating skills and knowledge might be one way. So you might want to get a promotion, and that promotion means that you need to know a couple of more things. So you might end up going to school, back to school, getting a master's, or maybe just going to some sort of conferences and then learning a little bit more. So you're going to update your skill set, and then you also improve your knowledge because of that. And then disengagement again is pre-retirement considerations. So you're thinking about retiring, letting go responsibilities, and then passing those responsibilities to the future generation.